Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 171 of Rush Roundtable. Today, we're going to be talking about the title track from Presto. Presto. I'm super excited to talk about this. This is literally one of my favorite Rush songs. And we got a great panel today. We got Paul, Omar, and Nick. This is such a great song. There's so much really awesome stuff in it. Just, it's super unique sonically among the rest of the Presto album. And there's so much here. I'm elated to be able to talk about this on this episode. So let's just cut the sentimental crap and let's just get right into it then. So the song opens up with the lyrics, "If I could wave my magic wand." Then after a little bit of acoustic guitar, it goes into the verse, "I am made from the dust of the stars and the oceans flow in my veins. Here I hide in the heart of the city like a stranger coming out of the rain. The evening plane rises up from the runway over constellations of light. I look down into a million houses and wonder what you're doing tonight." So immediately, jumping in with very intense, vivid imagery, almost kind of. I don't know if any of you guys get this impression from it, but I feel like it's kind of like a higher power thing. Not necessarily like the person that's singing is a higher power, but all the analogies that they're making kind of makes it seem like they're this all-seeing, all-knowing being. Like, I am made from the dust of the stars and the oceans flow through my veins. It's like there's a certain like dimension of power with this character. What do you guys think about this first verse?
I'll take football and run with it. Presto, I know, was one of the titles they were throwing around for a show of hands. And then when they went with a show of hands, Neil held on to this, sticking with that theme of perception and perspective that is throughout the album. When it comes to magic or sleight of hand, it creates a different view or perception of a circumstance or a situation. So, I know in the interview that Neil did with Nick Cruin of Canadian Musician Magazine, was quoted as saying this, the lyrics reflect me and life as a theme. Although I invented the scenario, irony is also a tool I used on this album. So looking at it from that whole perception perspective thing, I'm made from the dust of the stars, the ocean blows in my veins. That's a big impersonal cosmic perspective. Uh, Here I hide in the heart of the city like a stranger coming out of the rain. And then it goes to the evening plane rises up from the runway over constellations of light. So you've got this, I'm part of the sky, but I look down into a million houses and I wonder what you're doing tonight. Now it's personal. Now it's intimate. So two different perspectives or perceptions of it, where you're part of this gigantic thing, or like a stranger coming out of the rain, or I look down at this, at everything below me and I wonder what you're doing. So two different points of view, very expansive or almost cosmic, and very intimate and personal. So, and there's an irony there. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how I start.
Wow, I'm completely the opposite spectrum in a way. When I started when I scrutinized these lyrics, when I saw that whole first verse, those first, not if I could wave my magic wand, made from the dust of the stars and the oceans flow in my veins. That to me is like anybody. We're all made from the dust of the stars, right? I mean, that's what we are, kind of physically. And then all of a sudden, it's like, here I hide in the heart of the city like a stranger coming out of the rain. I think it's just some guy who is contemplating a relationship, because this has happened to me. Like when I met my wife way back in the day, it was in another country, and I'm in the plane. I'm pretty sad because I'm leaving my girl I met that I was going to marry. And I'm flying and I'm looking down and I'm seeing all these lights. I'm wondering what all those people are doing. I'm wondering if I was seeing the house of my girlfriend, what is she doing now that I'm, flying away? So, I think in a way this song could, and there'll be more references to it, at least from my perspective when we get to it, is that it's about a couple and he has to be away for some reason. And I think it's because they're having issues with each other and they're trying to work it out. So, I mean, I'll point it out as the lines kind of tell it to me, but the way this started is like he's in a plane looking down, is like flying, and he was with her, now he's not, and he's contemplating certain things that were going on with him.
Yeah, for sure. I think especially as we get into, not to jump crazy ahead, but especially as we get into lyrics that are like, "I radiate more heat than light," and then just the whole idea of like, if I could wave my magic wand, I'd make everything all right. I think that's a very interesting idea to have forward with the whole perception of like a relationship. So yeah, I guess just going right into the chorus. If I could wave my magic wand, I'd make everything all right. I'm not one to believe in magic, but I sometimes have a second sight. I'm not one with a sense of proportion when my heart still changes overnight. Um, so coming out of the verse, I mentioned it very briefly at the start with the acoustic guitar. As the verse carries on, we get slowly introduced into the drum and bass part of this song. And by the chorus, everybody's kind of in this slow, easy groove. Definitely very unique for this album, where it's, especially as we see with tracks like Superconductor and Red Tide later on that have a bit more like drive to them. It's kind of interesting. This one's a little bit slower, but I like this feel a whole lot. It's really unique. And especially seeing Alex so heavily utilizing the acoustic guitar is really cool because, more often than not in Rush songs, and this isn't to discredit any like musicianship that they've had before, but typically the acoustic guitar was really only used for backing parts or introductions into songs. Like what immediately jumps to mind is the classical intro of A Farewell to Kings. But this features the acoustic a little bit more prominently. It takes a backseat a little bit later into the song, but I think it's kind of cool how long it stays around into this chorus. But what do you guys think of this section?
I agree. I think it has an ebb and flow, like a very palpable ebb and flow. Like there's songs that they intimate it, like you kind of can feel it's doing this. But with this song, the way the introduction was with the verse and then the chorus, it's still kind of going like, meandering kind of, and then it'll eventually pick up. So, in that case, as far as musicality, I think they're making it very apparent that, there are definitely separate parts that go together, but that they're pretty evident that they're separate and different.
Yeah, for sure. And by this point in the song, the magic lyrics are very prominent, which is kind of interesting. With an album called Presto, there's not a whole lot of allusions to magic. There are a good bit throughout the album, but it's mainly just contained in this song. But really using the power of like magic, like this magic wand that if you could wave it and make everything all right. I feel like it's kind of I'm kind of going a little bit on what Omar was saying. I like the idea of thinking about this as a relationship because, so often in relationships, you're in these points and you're like you're in these down like sections and you're like, I just wish everything could just go back. Like, why are we fighting about this? Like, what?
Yes, I wish I could wave the wand to make everything all right.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
And
what
I
it made
think
me think. Yeah.
yeah. And I think this, the allusions to magic, such a novel thing. A lot of people think about it like very childlike because it's like, oh, the magicians at the party or whatever. Using this like very mystical, almost childlike concept as a like way into these like deep impersonal relationships. It's kind of cool thinking about like the juxtaposition of like this happiness against just a very intense argument between people. I think it's kind of cool thinking about it like that.
Yeah, even melancholy. It's like,
Yeah, for sure.
I wish.
I just throw out there almost like a contrast. The first time they bring up outside of the first line of the song, the first time they use the phrasing of if I could wave my magic wand, I'd make everything all right. A personal approach. In other words, I'd make everything all right here, in that intimate space. When it comes up later, I'd set everybody free. So now we're expansive again, going back to those separate ways of viewing things. There's a contrast there. So,
Nick?
I'm sorry, I'm still back on the first verse. I mean,
what do you got?
The more like today I was when I got home today I was reading about before we came on here I was reading the lyrics and I mean it's definitely very personal. I mean Alex said that it's about feeling more active in your heart than in your head, not having answers to problems. So I mean I think when you hear like all the allusions to like a magic wand, it's just easier, sort of using magic instead of trying to have to use logic to figure things out because of all these emotions.
For sure. Glad you said that, actually, because I did write a note down there, and this is jumping a bit ahead line-wise, but the repetition of the line, I radiate more heat than light. When we do get there, radiate more heat than light, more heat being sort of a simile for emotion, and light being a simile for illumination. In other words, like you just said, more from the heart than the head. Don't ask me, I'm just improvising, et cetera, et cetera. I know I'm jumping ahead, but I radiate more heat than light. I'm more of an emotional person than an intellectual. I'm coming at this from a more emotional place than an intellectual place. He did say he was using irony as a tool. We think of Neil's lyrics as very almost stoic and academic, and this is a very emotional set of lyrics. So I think you really nailed it there. That's how I took it. But
I agree
for sure,
100% with that. Yep.
Awesome. So coming out of the chorus section, we get the next verse, bringing it back to kind of just the acoustic guitar and some hi-hat work. I had a dream of a winter garden, a midnight rendezvous, silver, blue, and frozen silence. What a fool I was for you. Then the entire band kicks in, and we're kind of in the groove now that we're going to stay with through the rest of the song. Very intense driving compared to what we've seen before in this song. But then the verse continues with, I had a dream of the open water. I was swimming way out to sea, so deep I could never touch bottom. What a fool I used to be. So this second verse, the first chunk of it kind of sticks with how the first verse was structured, where it's like kind of, abstract, disconnected concepts, but, they all kind of fit together. Like I had a dream of a winter garden, silver, blue, and frozen. But I feel like the second half of the verse, I had a dream of the open water. That entire back half of the verse is really dedicated to describing the exact parts of the dream, like swimming way out, but it was so deep I couldn't touch the bottom. And, that can be taken a number of ways, if we're thinking about, the relationship perspective, or even just wanting to go out and help people, as we're going to see later, with I'd set everybody free. I feel like there's, the second message of, oh, if I could have the magic wand, I would just make everybody okay, but it's that feeling of, you can't help everybody realistically. So, you kind of feel helpless. That's why I feel like the ocean being so deep kind of taps into that a little bit. Or even with the relationship things, if a relationship is so far gone that it's really hard to, try and recover that and rebuild it. It's like, you feel like, you're kind of stranded out in the water. Like, what am I going to do to make things better? That's at least my way of seeing it. What about you guys?
Yeah. These two, again, I'm surprised at how much I didn't know about this song, at least how it made me feel about it, till I looked at it this weekend and today, and wow, I mean, I was missing out, I think. So these two sections here where he had the dream of a winter garden, that part, and then the second part where he says, I had a dream of the open water. I think the first part is more, to me, like he's remembering the good times of his relationship. And then the second part where I had a dream of the open water is because he says at the end of the first part, what a fool I was for you. Like, guys, we do stuff for our girls. We don't care if we look foolish doing it, right? And then the second part is what a fool I used to be. So it's more like the whole relationship, like as a whole, is like, wow, I did a lot of things maybe I shouldn't have done, or because of the things I did, we are where we are, and that's where he gets I wish I could wave my magic wand, and kind of comes to the realization, like, I mean, I wish I could fix things for everybody. I mean, look what I'm going through. So I think this person is thinking of the good times, and he's also thinking about now it's not so good. It's not over. I don't think it's over between this couple, but I think he still has hope, basically.
For sure.
I think right now he's being kind of, melancholy, kind of thinking of how things could have been, how they used to be, not knowing exactly what to do at this point. I'm telling you, I'm shocked. I didn't know I was going to think about it.
Yeah, there's so much here. It's such a lyrically dense song, and there's so many different perspectives you could look at it from. It's really crazy. There's so many, we've had a bunch of different ways already of interpreting it. We aren't even done. We aren't even halfway through the song. There's so much stuff here, man.
I was going to say from mine, and it doesn't contradict. That's what I love about interpreting these is none of these are contradictory. It's not like, no, this can't be it because it's just two different ways of looking at it. What did we say at the start of this? Two different views, two different perceptions. So I'm digging that. But, the Winter Garden, the Midnight Rendezvous, Silver, Blue, and Frozen Silence, What a Fool I Was for You. Again, very intimate, very like literary romantic, not just, heart romantic, but in a literary sense, it could be considered romantic. And then, What a Fool I Was for You, specific, intimate. I had a dream of the open water. I was swimming way out to sea, so deep. So now you're in this big, expansive view. Again, it could be two different ways of looking at the same circumstance. One is very focused and one is very detached. So, and then as a side note, What a Fool I Used to Be, for anyone who's read Ghost Rider, it almost like to the point of goosebumps. Neil's used that line a couple of times. I listened to the audiobook and he was talking about life before, the very impacting things happened in his life. And he kind of threw that line out there as if it was, what a fool I used to be. And he says it like 3 or 4 times. And like I said, I listened to the audiobook and the reader even pauses there. I'm like, wow. So that gave that line a whole different view for me.
Yeah, it's kind of like it was a precursor to a situation that he could never have imagined could have happened to him. Exactly. Right? He's writing about it. Yeah, that makes sense that he would use those lines from here, in that book.
For sure. I think there's so much here about Omar, what you were saying about like past experiences, like what I have done in the relationship or just what I've done in general, how you've gotten to this point. And it's kind of, it's cool kind of thinking about it like that as well. Even just attaching it from like the relationships perspective and just looking at it as like an introspective piece. There's so much doubt in life, and especially like if you compare it to this, I had a dream of the open water section. You've done so much stuff, you feel like you can never recover from it personally, you're just drowning. That's just another way of looking at it, at least I think. Such a I'm going to say it and I'm going to keep saying it. It's such a lyrically dense piece of music that is just, there's so much there to unpack. It's crazy. And that's one of my favorite things about this song, especially as we get a little bit later into it. It's just so cool. Any other final thoughts on this verse before we move on? All right. So we got one more chorus, or we got another one right here. If I could wave my magic wand, I'd set everybody free. I'm not one to believe in magic, though my memory has a second sight. I'm not one to go pointing my finger when I radiate more heat than light. I think that last line, when I radiate more heat than light, is going to go in the books as one of my favorite Neil lyrics of all time. I think that's such a great, just a great image. Like I think about it, let's think about it in the relationship context again. You're putting so much work into, you can think of, I guess, kind of 2 ways. You could think about it in one way of, you're trying so hard to repair it that it's honestly getting a little bit toxic. Like if we're thinking about a relationship kind of way, like you put so much work into trying to make things better, but it just obviously isn't. And at that point, you're radiating more heat than you are light. You think about like a big lamp. It's like you want it to be nice, but you don't want it to make the room incredibly hot or, whatever. But then also you can think about it in like a neglectful relationship sense. You should be bringing a lot to a relationship, especially like a romantic one. But, if you aren't doing that, you're just creating unnecessary conflict for the other person. So, instead of being the light, you're just creating more heat that's just making them uncomfortable. That's how I see that last lyric. And I just think it's amazing. I think it's a great way to think about like, you're trying your hardest to put, all of your effort into making things better, but in the end, it's just kind of making things a little bit worse. And that's a very unfortunate reality that happens a lot of the time. But sometimes you do just radiate more heat than light. But what do you guys think about this next chorus?
I think Paul nailed it earlier too. And Ryder, you're writing it.
Yeah.
Pun intended. That last line where when I radiate more heat than light, I think it's just, you know, you're just angry, perhaps, or you would say things without thinking. So you're heated, and if you're talking in an illuminated way, that would be speaking like with light. So in this case, where he is or she, at this point, um, and also they're saying I'm not one to go pointing my fingers. Like, I know it's not all your fault. If I would think that, I'm not one to point my finger because I know that, I get heated and I don't always say what I mean, or, so I think there's a lot going on in that verse. It's a kind of like a realization, I think, that this person is going through.
And coming at it from a more abstract point, I'd say I'm not one to believe in magic, but my memory has a second sight. We're back to two different viewpoints here. And then I'm not one to go pointing my finger when I radiate more heat than light. Thinking of Neil as a lyricist, so the person who's narrating, if not, he's even said, I invented the scenario. It's not autobiographical, but I'm going to create this circumstance, and then I'm going to fill it with my views. I'm not one to believe in magic. In other words, I'm the storyteller, so I'm going to present you with fact. Then, though my memory has a second sight, I've got, I'm going to present these different points of view. Second sight, kind of a play on words almost, or an analogy. Not one to go pointing my finger when I radiate more heat than light. Even though I'm writing these lyrics, it doesn't mean I'm all knowing or I'm this removed stoic figure. I'm actually very emotional, but so that's why it goes back to what I said earlier about radiate more heat than light, and more emotion than illumination. In other words, I'm presenting all this to you, but the irony is the fact that I'm actually very emotional, even though I'm presenting it in a very static way. One philosopher's point of view.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on this chorus section?
I dig it, Paul. I dig it. Got you.
All good stuff. So coming out of that, we pick up the pace a little bit more with the instrumental. And we get the lyrics, "Don't ask me, I'm just improvising. My illusion of careless flight. Can't you see my temperature's rising? I radiate more heat than light." Revisited that. And then we get a short but really cool guitar solo. By this point, the electric guitar has kicked in. And I think this guitar solo is great. It's, just a little, I think, 8-bar solo. But it does such a great job of pushing forward the melody a little bit. You can hear some, little melodic lines that are in the song previously get revisited in the solo, which, I think it's a great talent of Alex. He does that a lot in his solos. If you listen really closely, you can hear repeated musical ideas. And then we got, "Don't ask me, I'm just sympathizing. My illusion's a harmless flight. Can't you see my temperature's rising? I radiate more heat than light. I'm not one to believe in magic, but sometimes I have a second sight. I'm not one with a sense of proportion when my heart still changes overnight." So I guess let's kind of all lump this together as a big bridge section, I guess. So what do you guys think about this whole part?
Real quick on the guitars, since you brought it up, one thing I love about this song is the fact that I know we've talked about it on previous roundtables. Rupert Hine had them back off the keyboards or suggested it, and they decided they wanted to do that. So with all the layers that Alex was, I hate to use the word allowed, but we want it, you're a three-piece, be a three-piece, is what one of the things Rupert said to them. So Alex gets to put all these parts in here and fill these. And the keyboard in the very beginning gives that whole magical, I forgot to mention it earlier, but right after the first line of the song, it's got that little flourish of the keys. And that, to me, that's, okay, I need an audio representation of magic. That's it. With the layering of the guitars here, and especially when we started off with this very clean acoustic sound, and then as you mentioned earlier, as we got along and the song progressed, it got to this very, and here comes the parallels, this very emotional, and the layers of guitars and even the bass, almost that now we're back to the other musical view of, and okay, we've gotten to this big buildup and now we're going to take another look at things. So just how I heard it.
Sure.
I love the guitar solo. I love that it's not long. I mean, it's a bridge of a solo. I mean, I think it's like it's technically it sounds like he did something technical here as far as the length of the solo, because it's really like it connects two sections of the song like perfectly, and
Hmm.
it didn't have to be long. It just had to be
Yeah,
perfect, and I think he nailed it. I mean,
yeah,
lots
for
of times he
sure.
nailed it. Well, being improvisational, which is, that's a gift that he had, but or that he has. I mean, I'm sure he still has. um, yeah, I think that guitar solo is sweetly short.
Yeah, I forgot to mention it too. Yeah, like what you said, the guitar solo actually introduces a key change in the song.
Yes.
Or maybe not a key change, just in the same key, but it's definitely very
Yeah.
noticeable. These aren't the same chords we've heard earlier in the track. Um, and I think it's a really interesting modulation because it really bumps up the repeating of or I guess somewhat repeating because they changed a little bit of the words, but the words that we're saying earlier in the verse, right before the solo, um, I think it kind of highlights that this is one of the main ideas of the song. The whole, can't you see my temperatures rising, radiate more heat than light. It's a very crucial idea to the rest of the song. Because it's repeated a couple more times throughout this, with like the backing vocals and stuff towards the end. But yeah, this little like key change section, it's done so well. There you don't hear any noticeable studio cuts or anything. It's just straight in, and it just sounds phenomenal. But yeah, any last thoughts on this bridge?
Reminds me a lot of anime.
For
Very
sure,
short,
yeah.
sweet, to the point guitar solo, and pretty much perfect. So that's how
Yeah.
I've always felt about the anime guitar solo. And I feel the same way about this. Is it's just it's like what is like 4 8 bars or whatever. It's very
Yeah.
simple, but it's just boom to the point, simple, short, really great live, perfect solo.
Oh yeah. We'll definitely get into the live version at the end of
There's
this, which
also there's
Mhm.
also an interesting change in the improvising and sympathizing, um, which is
That's
just
Neil doing that on purpose.
yeah. So I guess since we're at the end of the song, I didn't get a chance to say anything about the first two verses at all. Um, the first two verses, though, to me, I think they're a lot more simple and to the point than you guys were saying. To be honest, I think the two first verses are just a guy thinking about somebody he cares about because he's touring. This song's about touring. It's about touring. Let's get to the
Mhm.
point. It's Neil talking about touring. It's 1989 when this album came out. 89, Neil said, I kind of done tour. Like he kind of wanted to be done touring. Like he said, I'd be cool if the guys could have a hologram out there playing for me. And this song is about him thinking about, dealing with those feelings about touring, leaving the ones he loved. His daughter was 11 at the time. His first daughter was
Yep.
11 at the time, um, at home with his wife. And he was thinking about like missing time with her. And so throughout this whole entire song, like the more like we go through these lyrics, the more I realize like he's talking about himself. He's debating with himself about dealing with this tour and being away from his family. Um,
I knew it
lyrically,
was
the
about someone. I knew
it's
it was about someone. That's it.
yeah, it's 100% about his fan. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at the whole thing, and it's
Oh, it
you
makes
know,
sense. Yep.
yeah, you can just hear throughout him talking about like going back and reflecting back to probably like before he goes on tour, having to go and tell his wife and daughter, hey, by the way, the guys and I are going out for 4 months to 10 different countries in Europe and then back to the States, and then I'll be back in Canada at some point. So like it's wild because to me, like I've said this before, that Presto to me as a song doesn't fit on its own album. I really feel like musically it does not fit at all with the rest of the album, but lyrically it's it's actually like perfect in there. Um, you look at some of the lyrics to some of the other songs, some of the other reflective songs, and some of the ways they reflect on show business. You know, um, show me, don't tell. On the available light, talking about being being able to see the crowd outside the light and being able to see things from the crowd's perspective. Um, you know, some of the other War Paint talking about going out and being seen. So to me, lyrically, as we've gone through, and this is something I've just kind of realized as we've gone through these lyrics, is that I've always felt that musically that the song doesn't fit. Lyrically, it does. It fits perfectly, and I can see why they chose it as the album.
For sure, yeah. I think, yeah, especially I said it earlier as well. Yeah, it's really unique in the whole sonic ideas of Presto. Very prominent acoustic guitar. It's a very standout track, and I don't blame anyone for being a little, pushed back by it or like kind of pulls them out of the record a little bit, even especially because it's the title track. But I definitely agree that lyrically, this is one of the strongest songs on the album in relation to the larger themes at play. And I really like what you mentioned about the whole show business thing and the touring. Definitely mentioned a whole lot throughout the album. And that's another amazing way to look at the song. I think that was officially said somewhere, or maybe another song like related to this. I don't know. I thought I heard that somewhere, but yeah, that's a really great way of looking at it, especially like considering what was going on in Neil's time in his life. Yeah, so coming out of that,
I'm sorry, Ryder. I just thought of something based on what Nick said, and the way, I think that's why Neil is so relatable. Like those that didn't know him would think he's pretentious or stuck up or whatever, but when you know him, or from a fan's perspective, when you know him,
know where he's coming from.
Yeah, when you know where he's coming from. He's so relatable. Like songs like Subdivisions, so relatable. A song like this, he's like Nick said, he's probably writing about himself. But I came up with something that, when I saw it, similar to that bass that Nick was talking about. And even when Paul brought up the wider picture, right? I think Neil purposely does that with all these lyrics. There's almost always more than one meaning to what he's writing, and he knows it. So he's putting these phrases, these allegorical references, and he read so much that he could pull all of these tools, all of these words, all these phrases from anywhere and just put it in.
Writing during the writing of this album.
Sure, exactly. So I can use this here, right?
It's a very Hemingway approach. This is a very Steinbeck approach. Different perceptions, different perspectives, different views.
But in the end, it's relatable. It's not, we can see ourselves in a lot of this stuff.
Even the verse, I look down into a million houses and wonder what you're doing tonight. Even that, like, I've always felt that was him thinking about like his wife or a guy thinking about their girlfriend. And I thought, well, he's probably thinking about his 11-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And then I thought, man, if this was an 80s glam band, it'd be about some side piece. I mean, there's a ton of different ways you can go.
That's how they see it.
If this was like Motley Crue or Warrant or something like that, it'd be about like 2 or 3 side pieces. But like this is Neil. He's not that kind. This is Rush. This isn't that kind of band. This is much more thought provoking. So obviously, everyone can see where it kind of takes you. So
yeah, for sure. I'm just trying to think about.
I was thinking of something funny. I changed my mind.
I'm just stuck thinking about Motley Crue playing Presto. I just can't get that image out of my head anymore.
Man, when I was going through Chicken LaGrange.
When I was going through mine, I was actually thinking of a Shakespeare quote from Hamlet, which was, "There are more things in heaven and earth that I dreamt of in your philosophy." And it's just different views and ways of looking at it. So it can go at that abstract, or it could be like, or there's this way of looking at it. Mm-hmm. There's a side piece view. So,
I think it's funny, but I think, if someone looks at these lyrics and they really start to think about it, even if not a fan, they could see all of these situations in their life at one time or another. I mean, it's pretty very much relatable, way more than I thought. I have a new appreciation for this song, for the lyrics, more than the music. Actually, I love the music. Yeah.
I completely agree with you, Omar. As I was listening on my way home today and then reading through the lyrics, I found myself like appreciating it more than I did before. Even though I always liked it, I always liked the song. Yeah. It's just I never really realized like how like meaningful it was. And as we've gone through the lyrics, as I said, I totally like changed my perspective on where it fits with the band, where it fits into the album, just where it fits overall into life. And this song was awesome live. I just want to say this song was great on the Time Machine tour.
Yeah.
I wish
And
I could have seen it.
and this
I'm
song has
so
always been my favorite song. Oddly enough.
off
With
of just Presto or
no, for
entirely?
Presto.
Okay.
This song Presto has always been my favorite song on this record. And I never really paid that much attention to the lyrics. It's the vibe that the song is. Yeah, like you mentioned, right? It's kind of like, and you too, Nick, kind of like not exactly part of the record, but it's the title track.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And going off what Nick said as far as them playing it on Time Machine, I think not playing it on Presto, when I saw the Presto tour, I was disappointed that they didn't play it. But they played a couple other ones I was dying to hear. So I was glad for that. When they pulled it out for Time Machine, how do I phrase this? I know that Geddy's voice was going through, like it was at a certain point where the material they were writing, and he was writing vocally, it was as strong as ever. Some of the really older stuff, it wasn't his voice wasn't as suited for it by then. I think this was an excellent choice to pull out back around 2010 or so, because it was very much what was still in his very strong vocal range at that time period. So it's like, okay, we need to do something off Presto, maybe, or something from that era that we haven't done before. I'm not saying this is an interview. I'm saying that this might have been the thinking. Presto was a great choice. They hadn't played it live. They knew the fans liked it. So pull that one out, and his voice nails it. That
doesn't it fit? Amazing. Doesn't it fit so well with the Time Machine theme to the whole?
Yes.
I mean, they played it right after Time Stands Still. Like, talk about a perfect back-to-back combo from two songs that are on completely different albums. I mean, just a perfect back-to-back in that show. And then after they're done with that, you kind of get that pause where Geddy says hi to the crowd. And it allows the show to then carry on from a different point. Like that, even just that little let's put it after Time Stands Still. I mean, talk about just a really emotionally perfect moment in a concert set list.
I can picture them planning the set list like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the whole, it's all set like that. This will work great. But when you think about it, their set lists load perfectly. So.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, when I think of this song too, as we were talking through the lyrics and think about it live too, is I guess to me, I've always felt Presto is almost like the album I would wake up to from Rush. I've always felt the late '80s stuff is the overnight, is at night, because the '80s is very much like that night at the bar type music, and not Rush in particular, but you know what I mean? I always felt because there's a lot more acoustics, there's a lot more guitar, they kind of ditch most of the synths. I always feel like Presto is very much springtime, early morning type. And this song is very much sit around, sit on the back porch as the sun's coming up type music, with your friends just hanging out, finishing off the cold ones, probably, feeling pretty good and just talking about life and stuff.
And it was the start of their next era. So
100%. Yeah. I mean, a total transition from everything that come before.
Paradigm shift.
Yep.
So Nick, I got a question for you. So you were at the Time Machine, that Cleveland show, right? Were you kind of taken aback when they started playing Presto? It's were you whoa, wow, this is
Yeah, I mean, I had actually seen them earlier on the tour. And when I first saw them earlier on the tour, I hadn't looked at the set list. So when they played Presto, it kind of threw me off because I had heard they were going to play some stuff from Presto, and I was like, okay, well maybe they'll play my favorite personal song is Chain Lightning. I love Chain Lightning.
I was going to get Superconductor.
I've always felt that Chain Lightning suffered from the audio recording of this album. And so when they played Presto, I was like, oh, but it came after Time Stands Still, and I was like, oh, this is going to be different from Snakes and Arrows. This is going to be more perspective, thinking about life, more emotional. Snakes and Arrows was just like a rock concert. This is very much. This is a Rush show. This is going to be very intimate. So yeah, I was taken a little back. I was kind of like, whoa. Yeah. Oh, and that was another thing I meant to mention. Of all the songs on this album, I think this song the most suffers the least from the audio quality of the album. Yeah. Because in my opinion, I don't know how Omar and Paul you feel. I know Ryder feels this.
I would agree with that.
The album suffers from the recording quality of it. It's very lacking something. And to me, Presto is the one song that sounds like it's just fine.
For
I think it's
sure.
because it sounds the most naturally played, if you get my
Yeah.
drift.
The
It's like
warmest, and
it might be that they're all
any-
recorded exactly the same, but for some reason this song is so smooth and natural.
it's got a warmth.
Yeah, it's like, could be bad recording would still sound
It
sound
it
good.
almost sounds like they were all together recording this song, because
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you
something
see the
like that.
videos, Getty does his vocals separate from them playing from Alex playing his guitar, or they're laying down the track. This song sounds like they were chilling in like the living room and they just played the song.
Yeah, like a moving
For
picture
sure. It definitely
together.
feels like a much more intimate moment between the band. Like it's especially in, this last little section right here, which, since we're already here, why not let's just read through the lyrics. Goes through a bunch of repeating, I'm not one to believe in magic. If I could wave my magic wand, though my memory has a second sight. And then these backing vocals come in, which when Getty sings this next lyric, I'll make everything all right, that there's just something about the delivery of that line that is so powerful. Every time I hear, that's my favorite part of this song, is when you just hear him in the back saying that. And I'm so bummed out that on the Time Machine tour he didn't like fully do that whole line. But going through the rest of it, I'm not one to go pointing my finger. If I could wave my magic wand, when I radiate more heat than light, I'd set everybody free. I'm not one to believe in magic. If I could wave my magic wand, I'm not one to believe in magic, and then a very tasteful fade out for the rest of the song. Closing the book on this whole kind of the magic thing, and really just bringing it back to the whole point of the song. I want to make everything all right. I'm not one to go pointing my finger, radiate more heat than light. There's just so much content that's revisited here. And I think the instrumentation, let's talk about how we were talking about the album mixing. I think this last little section right here is like, it's so full. Like, you have the acoustic guitar going, you got a little bit of the electric in the back. But then also very faintly in the background, you can hear like, a keyboard holding down just some basic chords. And that just fills up the space so much. I think one of the biggest downsides of the wall bass, as much as I like it for, songs like Open Secrets and, some other great songs from that little late 80s era, I really like the sound of it, how pronounced it is, but I think it loses a lot of the bottom end. And it's almost like, even though this was the album to try and stay away from the keyboards, I feel like they cranked like the high and mid end and just kind of forgot about the low end on the bass. That honestly, some of these songs kind of need these keyboard accompaniments. Honestly, that's how I kind of feel about it. But the way that they use it just as kind of like these big blocks to hold down like the basic chords of the song, of this little outro section, it's just great. I think it's incredibly tastefully done. It's not in your face, and it just, it makes this ending section way more epic. And I'm sure it sounded incredible live. I think this outro is one of my favorites. And I'm not the biggest fan of fade outs, but I think this one is done very tastefully. I don't think the song was very suited to a big rock and roll ending. I think, as I said, it's a little bit more intimate. So I'm fine with the fade out, honestly. I think it's just a great way to bring a close to the song. What do you guys think about this outro part?
I agree with you as far as you used the word dense earlier, and I would very much apply it here. I think musically, this is like everything has come out, to go back to the magic allegory. Everything is coming out of the hat for the end of this. It's not too crowded. It's just, here is everything. Here are the lines. Here's the layers of the guitars. Here's Neil's fills and his playing. Here's the bass. And then all the layers of vocals. Again, Rupert using Getty's vocals perfectly to very, very good effect here. And you mentioned a line that got you. The one for me was, I set everybody free. It's just, it's subtle. It's back there, but amidst this big cacophony of stuff coming out, it stands out. So there was one stood out to you. That's the one that stood out to me. I'm sure there's other things that people sonically are picking up on, but this is, like I said, going back to the Magic Hat, all the stuff coming out of it at the end. And I agree. This is a song that should fade exactly the way it did. A live version was very, very cool for the ending. This one feels more personal to me, just as far as the studio version, but that's my take.
I feel like it took them, I feel like they figured out like a definitive end as opposed to a fade out 20 years later. Because I I feel like the live version, I liked the way they ended. I'm usually not a big fan of fade outs. I didn't mind the fade out because I like what all they did. Like you said, it's very dense. There's a lot going on. To the point where I kind of wish we almost just got that part of the song at the same level and got to hear everything. But I like, though, at the same time, though, I like what they did do on the live version. The way they ended it, it
Oh
was
yeah,
really
for
good.
sure. Me too.
And I mean,
think, yeah.
I will say this too. You mentioned how they forgot their lows. Swear to God, the first time I saw Presto live, I had to kind of not be dumb for a second. I was sitting there, I was going, "Is this? Did Alex go to drop D tuning? Like, are we in drop D right now?" I was like, "You've been you've been in enough metal shows. You know what drop D tuning is." No. They didn't do that. It's just live. It's just different. Like they didn't do drop D tuning on this song, even though felt that way.
Yeah. I think, and even with the ending that they did on the actual tour, it's not incredibly like huge, like how some of the other songs in this album end or how they would play them live. This is, it was a very tasteful ending, and then it ends with it's the little sound effect, which I think, that's another great way to end the song. I think, it didn't need the giant rock and roll ending. I like the fade out. And then when they played it live, they still had a tasteful way to conclude the song. I hate when bands try to do live fade outs. I cannot stand it. So I'm glad that they were able to find a really tasteful way to, bring the song to a close. Any other final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I thought of something. I think Nick, you nailed it as far as what I think really the song is about. Fundamentally is about Neil's touring, what he felt about it, right? And then Ryder, you mentioned one of your favorite lines, "I'll make everything all right." So the way the song fades out, I think it's Neil coming home, because it sounds triumphant. It sounds like he's returning. It sounds like there's hope there. And I think that earlier in the song, there may have been things, let's say, it could have been Neil writing about it himself or about a relationship, whatever, that, everything has a schedule, and, he had to leave, he had to go on tour. I mean, the date is the date. And maybe there were things that were left unresolved before he left. Maybe that didn't happen every tour, but maybe it had happened at some point, or maybe more than once. So this song, I think, personifies that situation where, you may have to travel, you may have to be away from the one you loved, and you were not able to resolve an issue that you had between the two. So you have to go away, but you love each other, you come back. And I think the way the song fades out, and even the way the song is concluded in live, has that same feeling of a triumphant return. It's joyous, it's hopeful. So, I think this song is I would call it pretty epic.
Yeah, for sure. I'd venture to say the same thing too. This is definitely, a standout track from the album. Very glad that it's the title track.
There's one other thing.
I
just thought of something. So live, they did play it differently. So before the guitar solo, they sang, "Don't Ask Me, I'm Just Improvising." And then on the studio, the guitar solo comes in. But live, they did that "Don't Ask Me, I'm Just Improvising," that part. Then they go straight to the second "Don't Ask Me, I'm Just Sympathizing" in the higher key. And then the guitar solo comes. So they switched the guitar solo in that second part. And I was wondering, how is the live version different? I couldn't make it out. This is what they did.
Yeah.
They just switched the guitar solo in the second "Don't Ask Me" section there, which I think worked out. And then when they finished that, they went back, they dropped the key back again to sing the rest of the song the way, the original key was. So I think that's hard to do.
Yeah.
I think, the musicians would know, like, changing keys like that. I think that's difficult. Of course, they pulled it off, but
yeah.
Real quick side note that we haven't mentioned, Neil's drumming in this is pretty basic but pretty good too. I mean, when you actually get, like, I remember live thinking his drumming's really, like, he was really into it, but he wasn't like, I mean, granted, I was in the crowd going up and jumping up and down, so I couldn't quite tell what all he was hitting, but it didn't look like he was using, more than maybe 10% of that, set. Of course, 10% of his sets, 90% of the average drummer's set. But still, like, it didn't look like he was using more than like 10% of his set.
He did do that roll towards the end, which
he
was
did,
cool.
Yeah.
I watched a drum cover of it before this video and preparing for it, and there's again a lot of flourishes, sort of like war paint, where there's a basic, almost simple backbeat or foundation, and then if you listen or watch the drum cover, you'll see there's a lot of fills and a lot of little intricacies thrown in there, and it just reminds me again sonically of, say, the Magic Wand, or there's this. Now I'm going to put that in there. A lot of ingredients.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It's very, like it's a very simple beat, but it does the song perfectly. I don't think the song needed to be like La Villa Strangiato levels of complicated. I think it's just, it's just simple enough, but it's, it does the song perfectly, and it still highlights a lot of Neil's strengths, the very solid backbeat and all the little fills that are thrown throughout the song. I think it's just a great job by Neil.
One negative I want to point out. I do have to point out one negative,
no.
and it has to deal with the recording, like we were talking about earlier. Oh, yeah. You don't get to hear Geddy's bass as much, in my opinion, on this song. Yeah, live, it comes out more, and you hear that there's a lot more going on. But
he's using the jazz bass in the Time Machine.
He uses the jazz on Time Machine.
Yeah, and it just sounds really good. But again, on the recording, it just doesn't really. It doesn't come out as much.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the things that sometimes I prefer to listen to the live version when I'm trying to listen out for the bass part, especially if I'm trying to learn the song. Definitely, if you're a bass player, definitely check out the live version if you hadn't. It's insane. It's so good. Definitely listen to that. I don't even think I can pick a favorite between the live and the studio. It's perfect. This song is just phenomenal. But yeah, any final thoughts?
I like the song more now than I did before, and it was my favorite song on the record. Not like it more.
I completely agree with Omar on this. Yeah. I like, after going through the lyrics so strongly, I like the song more now than I did even before, when I enjoyed seeing it 13 years ago live. I like it more now,
for sure. That's
perception.
Mm-hmm. It knocked me off my lawn seat when they played it in my show.
Awesome.
I was in the first row of the lawn seats.
Dang, that's crazy.
That was great.
Awesome. So there you go. That's the title track. That's Presto. What do you guys think of the song? Leave a comment down below. Let us know what you thought. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you know when more episodes of Rush Roundtable are coming out, along with some of our other shows like, we got Rush Roots. I think we got a new Stick It Out season coming soon. Might, keep on the lookout for that. Once again, like the video, leave a comment down below. Check out our merch, support us by a sticker or a shirt. And with that, that was Presto. See you guys.